You're listening to Revitalize and Replant. My name is Thom Rainer. I am joined by Kevin Ezell. This is part 2 of a 3-part series. If you missed part 1, well, let's talk about what the series is first. So your church wants to replant a church. We're doing a 3-part podcast series. Previous podcasts, which aired back on December 23rd, previous podcast was, where do we find a church that wants to be replanted? Great discussion on that. If you have not listened to it, go back to that, because we kind of got a flow going in here. And as Kevin and I were ending this last podcast, we started talking about some things that you might hear when you go to talk to a church that wants to be replanted. Kevin, as always, good to have you here. I didn't even, we recorded something for a week ago podcast, and I didn't even greet you and say hello, but that's my nature. I'm not the nicest guy in the world. So hello.
That's not true. I know you always prefer a hug, in the videos. So, hey, yes. I always great to see you and grateful for you. Hope you have a good new year.
I hope you have a good new year as well. We're all praying that 2022 will be different than 2020 and 2021. That is for sure. Okay, part 2. By the way, this is Revitalize and Replant, and it's sponsored by the North American Mission Board. We always want to point you to churchreplanters.com or namb.net for all the resources and information they have. It's a repository of excellence. You need to go there and see all the possibilities there. So almost any question you have in this area, they will have something that will point you in the right area, because now North American Mission Board is about starting new churches and helping churches that are about to close not close their doors, keep the doors open. That's what we're talking about when we talk about replanting. You will also hear us refer to replanting at times as adoption, bringing another person into your family. But it's when you bring a church into your church family, they legally, officially, and even above all, relationally become a part of your church. Now, here's a scenario. One of you are about to go into a church that wants to talk about replanting. Maybe you got this audience. Maybe you developed a relationship, which is even better. You go there, and I've only done one of these, so I can only imagine for those of you who've done more than one. And you sit down and you start talking about replanting, and you typically will have this great vision about what it's going to be like to have 2 churches or more working together. And then you say, do you have any questions? We're going to prepare you for some of those questions that you'll hear when you talk to a church about being replanted. I've heard a lot of them from Mark Clifton, who is really Mr. International Harvester Replanting excellence. But I've done one myself, and I've even heard some of these. This almost would be, Sam and I did a video cast not too long ago of unusual foods that people bring to potluck suppers, like armadillo pie and things like that. And this one will have some of that same fun, because we're going to go in, we're going to get you ready, and it's time to listen to what is about to happen. All right, Kevin, I've kind of given a little bit of the background, but help us to understand, not necessarily, we'll get into some of the specific issues, what is taking place in the mindset of the church members who are in the church that may be acquired or replanted.
Yeah. Well, to me, I always try to prep myself when I go into a meeting like that, realizing this church is not where they are because they're incredibly strategic.
True.
They're not where they are because they're forward thinking or they have their priorities in the proper order. And that's why I've been amazed. And you say shocked, you think you'd never be shocked by some of the questions that are most important to them, but times of services or, where people sit, or where you're going to move the auditorium around, it is no limit to where the questions start.
Well, the one that I went to was a situation for my son, Jess, who has a church in Nashville area, and a church was thinking about being acquired. It was actually a non-denominational church, pretty Baptistic in origin, and they were down, typical situation, maybe 11 or 12 people. And if I had, when I went in there, I actually lowered the median age by 15 years, even though I'm in my 60s. It was pretty bad in terms of age. And because I'd heard from Mark Clifton and you so many times, I thought I was prepared for what I would be hearing. but I was not. The two big issues that caused the entire 90 minutes of conversation, which I did not control well, one issue was, are we going to get to use our hymnals?
Yeah.
And I said, y'all, I looked at your hymnals. They're like 10 different kinds. I said, you don't even have a common hymnal. Well, we're always told the name of the hymn and we look it up in the index and we're able to sing along. So they wanted to keep and all those hymnals were falling apart. And then the second one was, are you going to change our pulpit? Will it look like one of those newfangled pulpits?
Yeah.
Well, needless to say, that meeting did not go well. Jess's church did not adopt it. And Jess said, what is your prediction? I said, close in 2 years. They closed in 7 months.
Yeah.
But that's the scenario walking in.
Yeah. It's amazing what, normally when you sit down in kind of negotiation, you try to discern what are the non-negotiables. And those are typically pretty big items. In this type of, you just have to understand it's the small things that will completely, and I would encourage a church that's thinking about helping replant or revitalize a church, don't give in to those. Because if you commit, say, okay, we will always put the hymns up on the hymn board. There, in some church, I know.
Oh yes, that's true.
They want to, when they walk in, they have a hymn board up front with all the hymns on, the numbers on it, and they want that hymn board up there because it was given in honor of their grandfather or whatever, And then they want to ask about the cosmetics. What are you going to change about the church? And we just recarpeted 3 years ago, and all those. I would just encourage you when you go in there, be real careful what you commit to, because you could really you can really handcuff yourself on trying to revitalize a church if they don't want. And it tells a lot about where the people are coming from, about what are their very first things they mention. Because I'm just amazed. Like, you had time to think about it, and that's the first thing you thought of. I don't say that, but I'm just sitting there thinking, like, man, you got to be kidding me.
Well, that's our first point. What will we have to give up? Fill in the blank. The pulpit, right. The hymnals, the hymn board, whatever the case may be. What will we have to give up? And you're exactly right. Not only don't you yield on that, but you have to understand, if you do yield and then back out of it, you will have lost some credibility, and it may even be an integrity issue.
Yeah, and that will lose credibility to help adopt or foster other churches, because churches do talk. And whatever you do, you want to be true to your word. And that's why I'm saying slow to commit to long-term things, because they just don't work. I mean, they it's amazing to me, Thom, the majority of people, when I sit down with a church, when we were doing this, they would sit down with me as if they were the successful church and wanting to tell us what they had to have in order to make this happen. And they were treating us like the ones that had no clue. And I remember saying this in one meeting. It's like, look, I want to be respectful, but you invited us here because you are in a hole. I'm not in a hole. I want to help you out of the hole that you're in. And I just had to remind them that, who's the desperate one here? I can pay my light bill. You can't. And I would try to do it in a nice way, but
yes.
But
you got to be firm on those sometime.
Yeah.
One of the issues is name change. Obviously, if you're acquiring a church, it's going to be challenging. I don't want to say it's a blanket thing, but it's going to be challenging that they will end up with the same name once they become a part of your family.
Yeah. And what I always try to do is be honest with them. Say, look, let's just don't determine a lot of that now. Let's wait and see. Or ultimately, if they're not going to give up their name, they're not going to give their name, and you just got to decide if you can do it or not. I had one church say, look, all right, we realize you're trying to want to change the name. We're fine with that, but just do not call us Redeemer or anything. they had gone to this church plant or something that said something in Redeemer, and they did not want to be a Redeemer church.
Well, there are other places than that.
Yeah, there's plenty of names out there we can adjust. So.
Yeah. So a couple of years ago, I did an article about some of the most common new names for churches. So, we often think that, oh, that's a new cool name. Well, so many people adopt that name that particular name now becomes the old name. What was
Yeah.
First Methodist or First Baptist becomes now something else, and they adopt
Yeah.
that. Don't be Redeemer. Don't be Redeemer. I love
Yeah.
that. All right. Most of the time, I don't know most of the time. I don't have data on it. So I'm going to back up. Some of the time when you go to a church and talk to them about replanting, my most common experience that I've heard from Mark and the one case where I was there was the pastor's already gone. But there is a possibility that the pastor is still there.
Yeah.
And he's part of it. And they want to know what happens to Pastor Jim.
Right.
What do you say there?
Well, hopefully you've talked to Pastor Jim already.
That's a great point.
And sometimes what they think Pastor Jim wants and what Pastor Jim really wants is totally different things. I typically do the Cracker Barrel trip and say, hey, Brother Jim, tell me, what's your perfect scenario here? What's your plans? Because if he's looking to retire in 6 months, or my word, I just need another year and I can retire, or you can't afford to bring on everybody to be a staff person long term.
Yes.
Just so many people can do hospital visits or whatever you're going to have him do. And so, my max was about a year transition. If you did that, and I've seen some of those really work well. I mean, Idlewild did that years ago. They bring a guy on transitionally for a year or two, and in Florida, and man, worked fantastic because he was kind of a cheerleader, wanting it to happen. And
That's good.
at the same time, he brought a lot of value and pastoral skills, but he also knew, let somebody else, get up there and communicate. But he got to do and so often, I don't know about your experience, but so many of the guys were good pastorally, just not good communicators necessarily.
Yes. Leadership and communication.
Yeah. And if you let them take care of the people and do some of the pastoral part, they were in their sweet spot and didn't have the pressure of doing what they really weren't gifted at.
Yep.
And they loved getting out of that,
You'll often have these pastors who will be totally worn out by the time you talk to them.
Yeah.
And they're especially after the COVID wave has come through, multiple waves have come through. They're just worn out and they're happy. Just treat them with grace, treat them with generosity, and then they'll probably be happy.
Yeah. No, you're exactly right. And I tell you, I brought this up on the last episode, but there's a guy I know in Kansas that basically these churches are using his videos, but they have a pastoral care person on site. They have really a campus where they do that model. They have a leader, kind of gatherer, but then they make it a video venue, and the church loves it. This pastor loves it, and actually, this guy's doing 3 interims all at one time, just by video.
Oh my goodness, that is creative! Wow. Sometimes the potential church acquisition or adoption or replant, sometimes the church has a congregational form of government. That is certainly the case among Baptists, but others as well. And one of the things that comes up at points is, will we be able to vote on anything we want? And you have to, I don't know if that's going to be, will we have our own little church that we vote for us, or, we will have a vote with the larger body. Usually they want to vote on everything for their own current church.
Yeah. Yeah. We always made it clear. Will you have a vote? Yes. On your own? No.
No.
But the thing, and I told us, you got to understand, your vote in amongst 50 means more than your vote amongst 3,000. So, I mean, if you're looking to, in a sense, are you giving up? Perhaps, but I mean, what is it you want to vote on? I mean, again,
pulpit, name change, color of carpet. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
The usual issues that got them in this place to begin with.
Yeah.
Sometimes this question comes up: who preaches each week? What is the preaching model? And I guess that question has different implications behind it, depending upon if they have a pastor that they may expect to preach, or whether or not they let's say Kevin Ezel goes in and Kevin's the lead pastor. They may want to know, are you going to be preaching every week? Because they're relationally connected to you.
Yeah, and you really need to think through it as a church when you're looking at trying to help somebody of what model you really want to do. We always went in there. We went in with a real live preacher that we did a preaching team, and we would study together, do the same text but not the same sermon. But we would ping ideas around, but what we did make clear with them, look, I'm not sure, but we will find you a high capacity guy that I promise you have a history here of not being able to pick them very well. And so I promise you, if you're going to be part of our network, we're going to find someone that you're going to be thrilled with. And they ultimately realized that, hey, look, we have the resources to find a better person than they could. And we said it in a respectful, nice way. And we were able to every time.
And it will come up. This last potential question, this list is not anywhere close to being exhaustive. Kevin and I have already mentioned several others, but we'll talk about the common theme in all this in just a moment. The music. The music. What's the music going to be like?
Yeah. We're gonna still sing "Bringing in the Cheese," but
only if you're a Wisconsin church.
Yeah, that's good. I've had them say, "Now, are you gonna bring in drums? Or are you gonna bring in?" And like, they want to know what the parameters are. They know it may change, but are you gonna at least let us sing this? Or man, I was just at a church Sunday. They did such a fantastic job of doing both. It was so encouraging to see that. But just helping them let go of all their preferences. And that's what I try to explain. Do you want your preferences, or do you want the church to actually succeed and be here? And
the grandchild argument may be good at that point too.
Oh,
do you want this to be a church where your grandchildren will be happy coming here?
Yeah. Tell me, the songs that you like so much, are those the ones that your kids like? Yeah. Yep. And that's actually who we're trying to reach. So,
yep. Yeah. Well, you alluded to this right at the last 3 or 4 sentences. You're saying you use the word preferences, and the common theme of all of these questions is these are our preferences. You are rarely going to go. Let me explain the one time I went. I'm not an expert. They never ask a question about what do you believe? Mm-hmm. What's your doctrine? They never said a word. Now, we had already done our homework, and we at least knew what they had in writing, but they didn't know what they believed, and they didn't really care what we believed.
Yeah, and I've had them say, "Hey, look, man, we're game to adjust some of the theology."
Wow.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're talking about look, we're really when it talks about eternal security was the one that. I was talking to a church. It was a Christian church. And they said, majority of our people believe in eternal security anyway. We're game to let that go. I'll never forget that. It was
so we'll go in and we'll change our doctrine, but don't move that pulpit one bit.
That organ stays put.
Yes. By the way, little side trail before we wrap this up. Mm-hmm. Any idea what the history is of the organist and the pianist being the paid instrumentalists in a church? That question started coming to me because some churches are asking, should we have some type of stipend for our band members and our vocalists, because the pianists and the organists have always gotten it at our church. You have any idea where that started?
Where it started? No, I just know sometimes pastors go into churches and they underestimate the swag of the pianist.
Yes.
Sometimes I found that person is the one that rules the music person. As a matter of fact, I was just recently at a church where the music guy he outlasted the pastor. The pastor came in there going to make some changes, and he way underestimated the choir. The choir as a whole, if they have a choir, if they're still in that kind of a mindset, that's a whole voting block.
Yes, it is.
And yes. The pianist, they typically that's connected to an elder or a deacon somewhere that's got some kind of authority.
Last church I served as pastor, one of our part-time children's person came to me and just said, "Do you think my pay will increase at any point, part-time?" I said, "Well, tell me why you ask." I said, "Well, the pianist makes more than I do." Oh,
Yeah.
should have seen that. Should have seen that coming. Well,
Yeah.
we're doing a 3-part series. This is fun. The title of the series is So Your Church Wants to Replant a Church. 3 parts. Part 1 was where do we find a church that wants to be replanted? We just finished part 2, common questions you will hear when you talk to a church about being replanted. And stay tuned for our New Year's edition of the Kevin Ezell Show, featuring the North American Mission Board with a cameo appearance by Thom Rainer. But a New Year's edition is how to prepare your church to replant another church. We've talked about it from looking for a church, the perspective of the church being acquired, and now we're going to talk about how to prepare your church to replant another church. Well, Kevin, I'll see you in a year.
All right, buddy. Always good to see you.
See you in 2022. You've been listening to Revitalize and Replant, sponsored by the North American Mission Board and Church Replanters, as well as nam.net, churchplanters.com are the 2 places you want to go. So when you listen to us on a podcast, whether it's iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever, give us a rating and review. And also go to our YouTube channel, still very new, real new, and go give us a like there. Tell us that you're a part of that family, and subscribe. We'd love to have you to subscribe to it as well. As always, thank you for listening and watching Revitalize and Replant, where we're helping churches get healthier together.